My name is Cullen Ouellette. I'm 34 years old. 10 years ago, my parents asked me to co-sign their mortgage. For the family, my dad said. I was 24. I had just started my first real job. I trusted them. Over the next decade, I paid $147,000 toward that house. I never missed a month. Not once in 10 years. Last month, they sold it. Split the profit between themselves and my little sister. Bought her a brand new house. And when I asked for my share, my dad said 5 words I will never forget. That was your contribution. Be grateful. So I called a lawyer. And what she found changed everything. Before we begin, if you enjoy stories like this, take a moment to like and subscribe. But only if you truly connect with this one. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and your local time. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let me take you back 10 years, to the night my dad sat me down at the kitchen table and asked me for a favor that would cost me a decade. Actually, I need to start with last month, because that phone call is what cracked everything open. It was a Tuesday. I was at my apartment, halfway through a bowl of leftover pasta, reviewing a client's quarterly filings on my laptop. My phone buzzed. Mom. Hi, honey. Her voice was light, almost cheerful. I wanted to let you know, we sold the house. I set my fork down. You sold the house? Mm-hmm. Dad handled everything. The market's been so good. We got a wonderful price. I waited for her to say the next part. The part about my share. About the $147,000 I'd put into that mortgage over 10 years. She didn't. Mom, what about my money? A pause. The kind of pause that tells you someone already rehearsed this conversation and hoped you wouldn't ask the hard question. You should talk to your father about that. So I called Dad. He picked up on the first ring, which meant he was expecting it. Before you start, he said, let me be clear. That was your contribution to the family. You had a roof to come home to every holiday. You had a place at the table. Be grateful we even included you. Included me in what, exactly? In this family, Cullen. He hung up. I sat there with the phone still warm against my ear, listening to dead air. $147,000, 10 years of automatic transfers. And the word he chose was grateful. I stared at my laptop screen. The quarterly filing stared back at me. Columns of numbers, everything balanced, everything accounted for. That's what I do for a living. I account for things. And right then, sitting in my rented apartment at 34 years old, I started accounting for what my parents had taken from me. I called Brooke the next morning. My little sister, 4 years younger, a lifetime more favored. Hey, she sounded bubbly, distracted. I could hear Travis in the background, her husband, talking about countertops. What's up? Mom told me they sold the house. Oh my God, yeah, isn't it amazing? Travis and I found this incredible place. 3 bedrooms, 2-car garage, this gorgeous backyard. Mom and Dad helped with the down payment. My stomach dropped. How much did they give you? Does it matter? It matters to me, Brooke. She sighed like I was being difficult, like asking where $500,000 went was a personality flaw. $255, but that's between me and Mom and Dad. $255,000. I did the math in my head without even trying. It's a reflex when you've been a CPA for a decade. The house was purchased for $310. The area had appreciated significantly. After the remaining mortgage balance, the net proceeds had to be north of $500,000. They'd given Brooke more than half. They'd given me nothing. And how much did I get, Brooke? She paused. Then, you signed the papers yourself. Nobody forced you. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. I stood in my kitchen, my rented kitchen, and looked at the filing cabinet in the corner of my living room. It was gray metal, ugly, practical. I'd had it since my first apartment out of college. Inside the second drawer, in a manila folder labeled mortgage, were 10 years of bank statements, every automatic transfer receipt, every confirmation email. I'd kept them all. Not because I expected betrayal. Because I'm an accountant. It's what I do. Let me take you back. I was 24, 2 years out of college with my accounting degree, 6 months into my first real position at a mid-sized firm 2 hours from my hometown. I was building something. Small apartment, reliable car, good credit score because I paid everything on time. I was careful with money. Always had been. Dad called on a Sunday night. Come home next weekend. I need to talk to you about something. He was sitting at the kitchen table when I arrived. Mom stood behind him, drying a dish she'd already dried twice. We need your name on the mortgage, he said, just to help us qualify. Our debt-to-income ratio is a little high. What does that mean for me? Nothing. It's temporary. A year, maybe 2. We'll refinance you out once our credit improves. Mom nodded. It's just paperwork, honey. You'd be helping the whole family. I looked at Brooke's bedroom door down the hall. She was 20, still in college, not a care in the world. Nobody was asking her for anything. Will this affect my credit? I asked. Not if we pay on time, Dad said. And we will. He pushed a thick stack of documents across the table. Yellow sticky tabs marked where to sign. He flipped through the pages fast. Sign here, initial here, sign here. I asked about one page and he said, That's just the standard stuff. Boilerplate. I signed. All of it. I didn't read every page. I was 24, sitting at my parents' kitchen table, and the man asking me was my father. A month later, he called again. Payment's a little tight this month. Can you cover half? Half became every month. 1 month became 10 years. Here's what $147,000 looks like when you break it down. $1,225 a month. Automatic transfer. The 15th of every month for 120 consecutive months. I set it up the first year and never stopped it, because every time I brought up refinancing, Dad had a reason it wasn't the right time. Interest rates were bad. Mom's credit hadn't recovered. They were going to do it next quarter, next year, soon. Soon never came. Meanwhile, that mortgage sat on my credit report like an anchor. When I applied for my first home loan at 28, the lender shook his head. Your debt-to-income ratio is too high. You've got a $300,000 mortgage already. I tried again at 30. Denied. Tried again at 32. Same answer. I ran the numbers one night, because that's how I process things. If I had invested that $1,225 a month instead of sending it to my parents' mortgage servicer at an average annual return of 7%, I'd have over $200,000. Enough for a down payment and then some. Instead, I had a rented apartment with a gray filing cabinet and a landlord who raised my rent every February. I was 34 years old, a certified public accountant. I balanced other people's books for a living and couldn't buy my own home because my name was chained to a house I'd never lived in. But I had that filing cabinet. And in that second drawer was every bank statement, every transfer confirmation, every email where Dad said, "We'll take care of it next quarter." I kept them all. I pulled the drawer open, lifted the folder out. It was thick, 10 years thick. I set it on the kitchen table. Then I opened my laptop and typed, "Real estate attorney near me." Before I called a lawyer, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I drove home. 2 hours on the interstate, past the exit where the Dairy Queen marks the edge of my hometown, down Route 9 to the street where I grew up. The house was gone. Not literally. The structure was still there, but it belonged to someone else now. A red sold sign staked in the front yard, new curtains in the windows. I pulled into the driveway of the rental where my parents were staying temporarily, a small ranch 3 blocks over. Dad's truck out front, Mom's Camry beside it. Gerald Ouellette was sitting in his recliner when I walked in. He didn't get up. I paid $147,000 into that house, I said. I need my share of the proceeds. He muted the television. Your share? You had a roof to sleep under every Thanksgiving, a warm bed at Christmas. I had an automatic transfer to your mortgage servicer, $1,225 every month for 10 years. Mom appeared from the kitchen, eyes already wet. Why are you doing this to us? Families don't keep score, Cullen. I'm not keeping score, Mom. I'm reading the bank statement. Dad stood up then, slowly. He's 62, but he still knows how to fill a room. You want to be that kind of daughter? His voice dropped low. Fine, but you'll regret this. He turned his back and walked toward the bedroom, but his voice had cracked on regret. Just barely. Just enough for me to catch it. And I realized something I hadn't expected. He wasn't angry. He was scared. The question was, scared of what? Mom went to work fast. Within 48 hours, every relative with a phone number had the same version of events. Cullen was demanding money from her own parents. Cullen was threatening to sue. Cullen was ungrateful. The calls started on Wednesday. Uncle Tom, Dad's older brother, was first. Your father gave you everything, Cullen. He put food on that table for 18 years. Don't be ungrateful. Then, Cousin Megan. A text. This is so embarrassing for the family. Can you please just let it go? Then Aunt Ruth, Mom's older sister. Her call was different. She picked up the phone, dialed my number, and when I answered, she said nothing. 10 seconds of silence. Then she hung up. I didn't know what that meant. Not yet. By Friday, my phone was a wall of noise. Everyone had an opinion. Nobody had a question. Not a single person asked me, what happened? They all just told me to stop. I sat on my couch that night and stared at the ceiling. The apartment was quiet. The filing cabinet was across the room, and the mortgage folder was still on the kitchen table where I'd left it. $147,000. A decade. And every person in my family thought I was the problem. I almost let it go. I want to be honest about that. For about 20 minutes on that Friday night, I considered swallowing it, moving on, being the bigger person. Then I looked at the folder again. 10 years of payments, documented to the penny. Being the bigger person had cost me $147,000. I picked up my laptop, found a name, Margaret Voss. Real estate litigation, quiet title actions, fraud. I made an appointment for Monday. Margaret Voss had an office above a hardware store on Main Street in Whitfield, the next town over from mine. No marble lobby, no receptionist in a blazer. Just a narrow staircase, a door with her name in gold leaf, and a desk buried in paper. She was 52, gray-streaked hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain. She shook my hand once and pointed to a chair. I put my binder on her desk. Black, 3-ring, 3 inches thick. 10 years of bank transfer confirmations, canceled checks, emails, screenshots, and handwritten notes. Every page dated, every tab labeled. She opened it, turned pages slowly, didn't speak for almost 4 minutes. Then she looked up. Were you on the mortgage only, or also on the title? I blinked. I don't know. They said it was just the mortgage. There's a significant legal difference. If your name is on the mortgage, you're liable for the debt. If your name is also on the deed, the title, you're a co-owner of the property. Can you find out? County Recorder's Office. I can pull the records today. She closed the binder, placed both hands on top of it. If your name is on that deed, this is a very different conversation. Different how? She looked at me over her glasses, steady, measured. Different as in they didn't just take your money, Ms. Willett. They sold property you co-own, without your knowledge, without your signature. She paused. Or with a signature that isn't yours. I felt the room tilt. Not dramatically, just a slight shift, like when you realize the floor you've been standing on isn't level. I'll call you by Wednesday, she said. Keep that binder safe. I drove home with my hands tight on the wheel. So at this point, I'm sitting in a lawyer's office with 10 years of receipts and one question I should have asked a decade ago. Mortgage or title? Let me ask you something. Have you ever signed paperwork for a family member without reading every single page? If the answer is yes, type yes in the comments right now. And if you've already been burned by it, type the amount. I'll be reading every one. Now, here's what the county records showed. Margaret called on Wednesday, right on schedule. Come in, she said. I have the records. I was there within the hour. She had a printout on her desk, the recorded deed from the county recorder's office, dated 10 years ago. She turned it toward me and pointed to a line near the top. Grantees, Gerald R. Ouellette and Cullen M. Ouellette, as joint tenants with right of survivorship. I read it 3 times. You're not just a co-signer on the mortgage, Margaret said. You're a co-owner, 50%. You have been for 10 years. They told me I was just helping them qualify for the loan. The lender likely required you on both the mortgage and the deed to secure the loan against the property. Your parents either didn't explain that to you, or chose not to. I sat back. The chair creaked. I'd been paying $1,225 a month toward a house I legally co-owned. For 10 years, I couldn't buy my own home because of the debt-to-income ratio, and the whole time, I had a 50% ownership stake in a property that had nearly doubled in value. What does this mean for the sale? Margaret folded her hands. It means they sold a property you co-own. A deed transfer requires every owner's signature to convey full title. You didn't sign the transfer. You weren't at closing. You weren't consulted. So the sale is legally compromised, but that's only one of the problems. She pulled another document from her folder. Because someone did sign your name. She turned the page toward me. There it was. On the deed of transfer. My name. In handwriting that wasn't mine. I knew exactly whose handwriting it was. My father's handwriting leans to the right. He presses hard with the pen. Always has. The downstroke on his letters is thick, almost carved into the page. My handwriting is smaller, lighter, more controlled. An accountant's handwriting. The signature on the deed transfer was heavy, slanted. The C in Cullen had a sharp hook at the top that I've never made in my life, but my father makes every time he writes a capital letter. That's my dad's handwriting, I said. I'd recognize it anywhere. Margaret nodded like she'd already known. In legal terms, Ms. Ouellette, this is forgery, a felony in this state. Someone signed your name on a recorded legal document, a deed of transfer, without your authorization and without a valid power of attorney. There's no power of attorney. I never signed one. I checked. There's nothing on file. I stared at the signature. My father had sat in a closing agent's office, picked up a pen, and signed my name to sell a house I half-owned. He'd probably told them I couldn't make it, probably said something about me being busy, living out of town, probably smiled while he did it. The notary either failed to verify your identity or was complicit, Margaret continued. Either way, this sale has serious legal exposure, for your parents, for the closing agent, possibly for the notary. He forged my name, I said quietly. Not a question. I just needed to hear it out loud. To sell my own house out from under me. Margaret let the silence hold for a moment. Then she opened her laptop. I need to check one more thing. She didn't say what. I didn't ask. I was still looking at my father's handwriting, where my name was supposed to be. Margaret asked me to search my email archives for anything. Any message from my father that mentioned the house, the mortgage, or my share of the proceeds. I went home and started digging. It took 2 hours of scrolling through years of family emails, holiday plans, forwarded jokes, guilt trips about missing Thanksgiving, before I found it. Dated 7 years ago. From Gerald Ouellette to Cullen Ouellette. Subject line, refinance question. I had written, Dad, when are we going to refinance me off the mortgage? It's been 3 years. This is affecting my ability to buy my own place. His reply, don't worry about it. When we sell, we'll split it fair. You'll get your share. Just be patient. I read it 4 times. Then I forwarded it to Margaret. She called within the hour. This email establishes intent. Your father acknowledged, in writing, that you had a share. That directly contradicts his be grateful position. So what do we have now? 3 independent grounds. First, an ownership claim. You're on the deed. They sold without your signature. Second, unjust enrichment. You paid $147,000 into equity they kept entirely. Third, fraud. A forged signature on a recorded deed. She paused. I'm sending a preservation letter today. Cease and desist, demanding they freeze all proceeds from the sale. The letter went out that afternoon. Certified mail. 2 days later, Dad called. His voice was different, tight, controlled, like a man holding a live wire. You're hiring lawyers against your own parents? You forged my signature, Dad. The line went quiet. I could hear him breathing. Then he hung up without another word. It was the second time he'd hung up on me. It would be the last. Dad hired a lawyer, Ed Brannick, a local guy who handled family disputes and the occasional property closing. He'd been around town for 30 years, knew everyone, charged reasonable rates. The kind of attorney you call when you think it's a misunderstanding. This wasn't a misunderstanding. I know what happened in that office because Ed Brannick later told Margaret during settlement negotiations, and Margaret told me. Ed pulled the county deed, the closing documents, the mortgage records. He laid them out on his desk, adjusted his glasses, and the color drained from his face. "Gerald," he said slowly, "your daughter's name is on the deed." She was helping us qualify. She knew that. A verbal understanding doesn't override a recorded deed. She's a 50% co-owner. She was doing us a favor. That's all it was. Ed leaned forward. "And the signature on the transfer deed? At closing, was that her signature?" Dad didn't answer. "Gerald, I need you to be honest with me. Did your daughter sign the transfer?" "She wasn't available. I handled it for her." "Without a power of attorney?" Silence. Ed took off his glasses. "I need to be very direct with you. If your daughter's attorney pushes this, and based on what I'm seeing, she has every reason to, you could be looking at criminal charges. Forgery. Fraud. This isn't a family argument anymore." Dad stood up. "She won't go that far. She's my daughter." Ed didn't respond to that. He'd been practicing law long enough to know that the sentence, "she won't go that far," was almost always spoken by someone who'd already gone too far themselves. And he was right. I would go exactly that far, because I wasn't the one who'd crossed the line. 3 weeks after Margaret sent the preservation letter, I walked to my mailbox and found an envelope. Cream cardstock, calligraphy font. "You're invited to a housewarming. Join Brooke and Travis Merritt as they celebrate their new home. Saturday, 2 p.m. 14 Ridgecrest Lane." I looked at the address. 14 Ridgecrest Lane. The house Brooke bought with $255,000 of proceeds from a sale that included my money and my forged signature. She was throwing a party. I called Brooke. She picked up on the third ring, already defensive. "If this is about the lawsuit, you're throwing a housewarming for a house bought with money that includes my share." "It's our house. We earned it." "How exactly did you earn $255,000, Brooke?" She hung up. I sat with the invitation in my hand for a long time. Then I called Margaret. "I got an invitation to my sister's housewarming party." A brief silence. Then Margaret said something I didn't expect. "Go." "Why would I go to that?" "Because I need you to see who's there. Family members, friends, neighbors, people who will remember what was said and how your parents behaved." She paused. "And I need them to see you there, calm, composed, while your family celebrates with money they took from you. You want witnesses. I want context. If this goes to court, character matters, perception matters. And right now, your father is telling everyone you're the villain. Show up, be gracious, let them form their own opinions." I looked at the invitation again. The calligraphy was beautiful. The irony was suffocating. "Fine," I said. "I'll go." "One more thing," Margaret added. "Don't confront anyone. Don't reveal anything. Just be there. Let them talk." The morning of the housewarming, I did my homework. First, I checked the recording consent laws for our state. One-party consent, meaning I could legally record any conversation I was a part of without informing the other person. I noted the statute number in my phone, because that's the kind of person I am. I laid out my clothes. Nothing flashy. Dark slacks, a simple blouse, flats. Professional. The kind of outfit that says I came from work, even on a Saturday. On my wrist, I put the watch I'd bought myself 3 years into my career. A modest automatic, stainless steel, nothing extravagant. But it was mine. Bought with money I earned, not money I was given. I set my phone to record and tested it. Clear audio even through fabric. I dropped it into my blazer pocket. A small voice recorder went into my bag as backup. Margaret had texted that morning. "Remember, observe, don't engage. Let them perform. Your job is to be the calmest person in the room." I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. 34 years old. A CPA, an apartment renter. A woman whose father had forged her signature and whose mother had called every relative to paint her as the villain. I looked myself in the eye. "You're going to a party," I said, "at a house your money helped buy. And they think you don't know what you know." I picked up my keys and walked out. The drive was 25 minutes. 14 Ridgecrest Lane was exactly the kind of house you'd picture. 2 stories, double garage, an American flag on the porch, fresh sod in the front yard. Cars lined the street in both directions. I parked at the end of the block, sat for a moment. Then I got out. The front door was propped open with a wooden sign that said, "Welcome," in white script. Inside, the house was packed. 40, maybe 50 people. I counted without meaning to. Accountant brain. Brooke's friends from work, Travis's engineering buddies, neighbors I didn't recognize, and family. Uncle Tom by the fireplace with a plate of appetizers, Cousin Megan near the kitchen island, Aunt Ruth standing alone by the back window, holding a glass of water she hadn't touched. The house smelled like fresh paint and catered food. Brooke was in the center of the living room, giving a tour to a group of women. Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, hardwood floors. She gestured with both hands like a game show host revealing a prize. "And wait until you see the backyard," she was saying. "We just had the landscaping finished." Dad stood on the patio, beer in hand, chest puffed, talking to Uncle Tom about the smart move they'd made selling the old house. "Timing is everything," he said, loud enough for the people around him to hear. "Bought low, sold high. That's how you build generational wealth." Generational wealth, built with my monthly payments. Mom was in the kitchen, arranging a cheese board, busy in the way people are when they're avoiding someone. She glanced up when I walked in, then looked away immediately. Brooke spotted me from across the room. Her smile flickered. "Oh," she said. "You came. You invited me." She recovered fast. "Well, welcome. Make yourself at home." She said it with the slight emphasis people use when they want you to know you're a guest, not a resident. I smiled, took a glass of water from the counter. Aunt Ruth caught my eye from across the room. She held my gaze for 2 full seconds, then looked down at her glass. An hour into the party, Brooke clinked a fork against her wineglass. "Everyone? Hi, Travis and I just want to say a few words." The room quieted. People gathered in from the patio. I stood near the back, by the hallway, water glass in hand. "We are so grateful to everyone who came today." Brooke's voice was bright, practiced. "But most of all, we want to thank Mom and Dad." She turned toward Gerald and Diane. "Without your help, this house would not exist. You gave us the foundation to start our lives together. We love you so much." Applause. Mom pressed her hand to her heart. Dad nodded slowly, accepting it like a general receiving a salute. Nobody mentioned my name. Nobody mentioned 10 years of payments. Cousin Megan was standing 3 feet from me. She leaned over, voice low. "Didn't you help pay for the old house, too?" I looked at her, nodded once. Dad heard. I don't know how, maybe he'd been watching me, but he turned from where he stood, beer still in hand, and said it loud enough for everyone within 10 feet to hear. "Cullen had a small part in the beginning. We carried the real weight." A small part, $147,000. A small part. Uncle Tom shifted on his feet. Megan's eyes went wide. A woman I didn't know, one of Brooke's friends, glanced between me and Dad, reading the tension. Mom touched Dad's arm. "Gerald." He shrugged her off. I set my water glass on the counter, slowly, precisely, the way you set something down when you're choosing not to throw it. My phone was in my pocket. The voice recorder was running, and my father had just told a room full of people that $147,000 was a small part. Dad found me on the back porch 15 minutes later. The yard was empty. Everyone was inside watching Brooke give a tour of the upstairs. He slid the glass door shut behind him. "Drop the lawyer thing," he said. His voice was low, the way he talks when he wants you to know he's serious. "You're embarrassing this family." "I'm embarrassing the family." "Yes. Your mother can't sleep. Brooke is stressed out. Travis is asking questions." "Maybe Travis should be asking questions." He stepped closer. "I'm not playing around, Cullen. This needs to stop. You sold a house with my name on it, without telling me, without asking me. Your name was on there as a formality. You knew that." "The county recorder doesn't deal in formalities, Dad. The deed says I own 50%. His jaw tightened. That's not what we agreed to." "What we agreed to was that you'd refinance me out in a year. That was 10 years ago." He was quiet. Beyond the fence, a neighbor's sprinkler ticked back and forth. "And one more thing," I said. "Family doesn't forge signatures." The word landed like a slap. He flinched. Actually flinched. His chin pulled back half an inch, his eyes narrowed, and for a moment I saw something behind the anger that looked like raw fear. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Then he turned and walked back inside without saying a word. The glass door slid shut behind him. Through it, I could see Brooke laughing with her friends, Mom rearranging napkins, Dad crossing the room toward the front door with his car keys already in his hand. I stood on the porch alone. The recorder was still running. I pulled out my phone and called Margaret. I got what we needed. Margaret filed the complaint on Monday morning. I wasn't there. She told me afterwards, step by step, in the measured tone of someone who'd done this many times before. Civil complaint, filed with the county courthouse. 4 counts. Count 1, quiet title action. Requesting the court to confirm that Cullen M. Ouellette was and remains a 50% co-owner of the property located at 227 Birch Hollow Road. Count 2, unjust enrichment. Gerald and Diane Ouellette received the full proceeds of a property sale to which the plaintiff contributed $147,000 in mortgage payments and held equal ownership. Count 3, fraud and conversion. The defendant sold co-owned property without the plaintiff's consent, using a forged signature on a deed of transfer. Count 4, breach of fiduciary duty. Gerald Ouellette exploited a familial relationship to obtain financial contributions under misleading terms over a period of 10 years. But Margaret didn't stop there. She also filed a lis pendens, a public notice of pending litigation, on the property at 14 Ridgecrest Lane, Brooke's new house, because the down payment for that house came directly from the proceeds of a sale that was now legally contested. If the source money is tainted, Margaret explained, the assets purchased with it are subject to recovery. Dad and Mom were served on Tuesday afternoon. A process server knocked on the door of their temporary rental. Dad opened it, took the papers, read the first page. His hands shook. That's what the process server noted in the affidavit of service. And I'll admit, when Margaret told me that detail, I didn't feel triumph. I felt tired. They were served this morning, Margaret said. Now we wait. So my parents just got served with a lawsuit from their own daughter for fraud, forgery, and unjust enrichment. If this story were a multiple-choice test, what would you do in my position? Option 1, accept the be grateful and move on with your life. Option 2, sue for exactly what you're owed, no more, no less. Option 3, go for everything, including criminal charges. Drop your number in the comments and stay with me, because what happened next surprised even my lawyer. The call came 3 days after they were served. It was Dad, but it didn't sound like Dad. The voice was thinner, faster, the kind of voice a man uses when the ground he's been standing on starts to move. We need to talk, without lawyers, just you and me, father and daughter. My attorney has advised me to direct all communication through her office. For God's sake, Cullen, I'm your father. And I was on the deed, Dad, and you forged my name. Silence. That was a formality. The closing agent said, the closing agent will be deposed. So will the notary. More silence. I could hear him breathing. Heavy, uneven. Cullen, listen to me. We can fix this. We can work something out. You can work something out with Margaret Voss. Her number is on the complaint. He hung up. That's 3 times, if you're counting. 30 minutes later, Mom called, crying, deep theatrical sobs, the kind she used when I was 16, and she wanted me to feel guilty about going to a friend's house instead of staying home for movie night. Your father can't sleep. He's having chest pains. You're going to put him in the hospital, Cullen. I'm sorry to hear that, Mom. He should see a doctor. He doesn't need a doctor. He needs his daughter to stop this madness. He needs to discuss the settlement with my attorney. Settlement? There's nothing to settle. You helped us with the house. That's what families do. Families also don't forge signatures, Mom. She was quiet. Then very softly, you're tearing this family apart. No, I said. I'm just the first one to look at the receipt. I hung up, set the phone face down on the table, and didn't pick it up again until morning. Lawsuits are public records. In a small town, that means everyone knows by Friday. Uncle Tom called first, and for once, he wasn't lecturing. His voice was careful, almost gentle. Cullen, Is it true? Gerald forged your signature? That's what the county records show. A long pause. Then quietly, Jesus, Gerald. Cousin Megan texted, I'm really sorry I judged you before. I didn't know the full picture. And then Aunt Ruth called, not the silent call from weeks ago. This time she talked. I saw it happening, she said. For years, the way they leaned on you, the way they treated your money like it was owed to them. I should have said something a long time ago, she paused. I'm proud of you for not letting this go. I pressed my palm over my eyes. It was the first time anyone in my family had said they were proud of me in longer than I could remember. Thank you, Ruth. Not everyone felt that way. Brooke called that evening. No warmth, no preamble. You're going to ruin my house. Travis is furious. He's talking about marriage counseling. How could you do this to me? I didn't put a list pendants on your house, Brooke. I put it on money that was taken from me. Taken? Mom and Dad gave it to us. Mom and Dad gave you my share. There's a difference. She hung up. That must be genetic. But the call I kept thinking about was from Travis, Brooke's husband. He didn't reach out to me directly. Not yet. But Brooke let slip during her rant that he'd started asking her questions. Hard questions. Specific questions. Where exactly did the down payment come from? Who's Cullen, and why is she suing us? Brooke hadn't answered. But Travis is an engineer. He was going to find the answers himself. Mediation was scheduled 6 weeks after the complaint was filed. A neutral conference room at the County Mediation Center, long table, fluorescent lights, a water pitcher nobody touched, and the faint hum of an air conditioning unit that made everything feel slightly clinical. Margaret and I sat on one side, Gerald, Diane, and Ed Brannock on the other. The mediator, a retired judge named Hendricks, sat at the head. Dad looked 10 years older. His shirt collar was loose. Mom kept her eyes on the table. Margaret opened her folder. She spoke without drama, without inflection, just facts in order. Exhibit A, the recorded deed, showing Cullen Ouellette as a joint tenant with 50% ownership. She set it on the table. Exhibit B, 120 bank transfer confirmations, totaling $147,000 over 10 years. She set it on the table. Exhibit C, an email from Gerald Ouellette to my client, dated 7 years ago, stating, and I quote, "When we sell, we'll split it fair." She set it on the table. Exhibit D, the deed of transfer from the recent sale, bearing a signature attributed to Cullen Ouellette, a signature my client did not make, was not present for, and did not authorize. She set it on the table. And Exhibit E, an audio recording from a family gathering in which Gerald Ouellette publicly characterized my client's decade of financial contributions as a small part. Ed Brannock rubbed his forehead. He leaned toward Gerald and whispered something. Gerald shook his head. Mr. Brannock, Margaret said. Your client's position? Ed looked at Gerald one more time, then back at Margaret. We'd like to hear your demand. Margaret nodded. Let's talk numbers. Margaret opened a second folder. Clean, typed, the numbers precise. The property at 227 Birch Hollow Road sold for $685,000. The outstanding mortgage balance at the time of sale was approximately $160,000. Net proceeds to the sellers, $525,000. She looked directly at my father. My client is a recorded co-owner of 50%. Her share of the net proceeds, $262,500. Dad stared at the paper. Mom pressed a tissue to her mouth. In addition, Margaret continued, my client contributed $147,000 in mortgage payments that built equity benefiting both title holders. The defendants retained 100% of the proceeds. This constitutes unjust enrichment. She turned a page. Furthermore, the forged signature on the deed of transfer exposes the defendants to criminal liability, specifically felony forgery under state law. Statutory damages in civil fraud cases in this jurisdiction can reach double the actual damages. Ed Brannock was very still. Gerald's right hand was flat on the table. It was trembling. Our total legal demand is $502,000, Margaret said. However, my client is willing to settle all claims, civil and criminal, for $441,000, which is, as it happens, approximately 3 times her original financial contribution. The room was silent except for the air conditioning. Gerald looked at the number. His mouth moved, but no sound came out at first. Then, 400. Where am I supposed to? Margaret closed her folder. That's between you and your financial advisor, Mr. Willett. Ed put his hand on Gerald's arm. We need a recess. The mediator nodded. 15 minutes. Dad didn't look at me. Not once. 2 weeks later, we were back in the mediation center. Same room, same fluorescent lights, same water pitcher. But something had changed. Gerald Ouellette walked in like a man carrying a weight he couldn't set down. Mom was beside him, eyes red, clutching her purse strap with both hands. Ed Brannock had the look of an attorney who'd spent 2 weeks explaining reality to a client who didn't want to hear it. The settlement agreement was 12 pages long. Margaret had drafted it. Ed had negotiated minor language changes. Nothing substantive. The number was the same, $441,000, payable within 90 days. In exchange, all civil claims dismissed, no criminal referral. The lis pendens on Brooks' house removed upon full payment. Gerald signed first. His hand moved slowly across the signature line. His actual signature this time, not mine. Diane signed next. A tear fell onto the paper. She wiped it quickly, smearing the ink slightly. I hope you're happy, she said to me. Quiet, not hostile exactly, more like exhausted. I looked at my mother. The woman who'd told the entire family I was ungrateful, who'd weaponized Dad's chest pains, who'd said families don't keep score, while keeping meticulous score of everything I owed them. I'm not happy, Mom. I'm just done being invisible. She blinked, looked down, didn't respond. Margaret and I walked out of the building into afternoon sunlight. The parking lot was half empty. A sparrow was sitting on the hood of my car. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Good work, Ms. Ouellette, Margaret said finally. You did the work. You kept the receipts, she almost smiled. That's the part most people forget. I drove home with the windows down. The settlement wasn't money yet, but the silence in the car felt like something I'd earned. Paying $441,000 in 90 days is not something a retired factory manager and a part-time dental receptionist can do easily. It requires liquidation, sacrifice, math that doesn't lie. Gerald and Diane took out a mortgage on the lake cabin, the one that had been in the family for 20 years, where we'd spent summers as kids, where Dad used to say, "This is what it's all about." They pulled $160,000 from that. They liquidated a significant portion of their retirement savings early. That meant a 10% penalty from the IRS, plus income tax on the withdrawal. The effective cost of accessing their own retirement money was roughly 30 cents on every dollar. Dad sold his truck, the one he'd bought 6 months earlier, the crew cab with leather seats he'd been so proud of. It went for $22,000 under what he'd paid. Brooke had to return $180,000. She and Travis refinanced their house at a higher interest rate because their credit profile had changed and because the original down payment was now classified as contested funds. Their monthly payment jumped by roughly $400. Travis told Brooke he wanted to go to marriage counseling. She told him everything was fine. He said, "Our down payment came from forged documents, Brooke. That's not fine." The full $441,000 arrived in Margaret's escrow account 87 days after the agreement was signed. 3 days before the deadline, Margaret called me. "It's here." I sat down at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, looked at the balance. Then I typed 3 words into a search bar. Homes for sale. Not to celebrate, not to gloat. Just because, for the first time in 10 years, I was finally allowed to look. After taxes, attorney fees, and everything Margaret was owed, which she earned, every cent, I netted roughly $240,000. I wasn't rich, but I was free. The house I found was nothing like Brooks. No double garage, no landscaped backyard, no calligraphy housewarming invitations. It was a single-story cottage at the end of a quiet street. 1,200 square feet, small yard, a maple tree out front that was older than I was. The kitchen counters were laminate, not granite. The bathroom tile was dated. The porch needed a fresh coat of paint. It was perfect. The mortgage was in my name. Only my name. My credit score had finally recovered after the old loan was resolved, and for the first time in my adult life, My debt-to-income ratio reflected only my obligations, my choices, my life. Closing took 3 weeks. On the day I picked up the keys, I drove to the house alone. No one came with me. I didn't tell anyone. I stood on the porch for a full minute before putting the key in the lock. The maple tree threw dappled shadows across the front steps. A bird was singing somewhere. I couldn't identify the species, but it was persistent. I turned the key, opened the door. Hardwood floors, afternoon light through the west-facing windows, dust motes drifting. The whole place was empty. I walked to the center of the living room and sat down on the floor, cross-legged, like a kid, and I cried. Not because I was sad, not because I was angry, not because of what my parents took, because every square inch of this house was mine, and nobody could take it. It wasn't big, it wasn't perfect, but every square foot of it was mine. In a small town, a lawsuit between parents and their daughter doesn't stay private. It seeps into church pews and diner booths and the comment section of the local Facebook group. People pick sides. They always do. Uncle Tom sided with me. Not loudly. He wasn't that kind of man, but clearly. He stopped going to Gerald's poker nights. When someone at the hardware store brought it up, he said, "You don't forge your kid's name on a legal document, period." Cousin Megan sent me a care package. Candles, chocolate, a handwritten card, no legal opinions, just kindness. Uncle Phil, Dad's younger brother, stayed loyal to Gerald. He told anyone who would listen that I was money hungry and that families shouldn't air dirty laundry. He and Dad started having lunch every Wednesday, like a two-man support group for men who didn't want to admit fault. The pastor at Grace Community Church, where Mom and Dad had attended for 30 years, invited Gerald in for a private conversation. Dad declined. I heard later he stopped going to services altogether. Aunt Ruth invited me to dinner. It was the first time we'd sat down for a meal together in years. She made pot roast. We talked for 3 hours. Not about the lawsuit, about everything else, about her own regrets, about watching her sister marry a man she always had doubts about the silence she kept and the cost of it. "Your mother hasn't spoken to me since the mediation," she said. "She blames me for taking your side." "Did you take my side?" She considered this. "I took the truth's side. Same thing." I helped her wash the dishes. Standing at her sink, suds up to my wrists, I realized something. I'd lost a version of my family. But the people who remained were the ones worth keeping. Travis Merritt is an engineer, mechanical engineer to be specific, the kind of person who reads instruction manuals, checks specifications, and trusts documentation over verbal assurances. So when he sat down and reviewed the paper trail behind his own home purchase, the conclusions came quickly. The down payment on 14 Ridgecrest Lane was $255,000. Brooke had told him it was family money, vague enough to satisfy a man who was excited about buying his first home and trusted his wife. There was no gift letter in the closing file, no paper trail linking the funds to any inheritance or savings account. Just a wire transfer from Gerald and Diane Willette's account, funded, as Travis now understood, by the sale of a house that was half owned by Brooke's sister. "You told me it was inheritance money," Travis said to Brooke. "There was no inheritance. It was family money." "It was your sister's money, Brooke. Your dad forged her name to get it." I know about this conversation because Travis told me himself, 2 weeks later, at a coffee shop halfway between his town and mine. He was quiet, deliberate. He held his mug with both hands. "I didn't know," he said. "I want you to know that. If I had known where that money came from, I never would have agreed to it." I nodded. "I believe you." "We're doing counseling," he said. "I don't know where things are going to land." "I'm sorry, Travis." "Don't be." He looked at me directly. "You didn't do anything wrong." We sat for a while. Didn't say much else. He paid for both coffees, which I tried to refuse, and he insisted on, and we went our separate ways. Some debts settle in courtrooms, some settle in coffee shops. Both count. 3 months after the settlement, a letter arrived. Not an email, not a text. A handwritten letter in a cream envelope with no return address, though I recognized the handwriting immediately. "Mom." I sat on my porch, and opened it. "Dear Cullen, I know you're angry. I don't blame you. Your father made mistakes. It blame you. Your father made mistakes. I should have spoken up sooner. I carry that with me every day. But I need you to understand something. We weren't trying to take from you. We were trying to give Brooke a good start. She's younger. She needed the help. We thought you were strong enough to handle it on your own. We thought you'd understand. I'm not making excuses. I'm just telling you how it felt from where I was standing. I miss my daughter. I miss Sunday phone calls and holiday dinners and hearing about your work. I miss being your mother in a way that doesn't involve lawyers and courtrooms. If there's any way back from this, I'd like to find it. Love, Mom. I read it 3 times. The accountant in me couldn't help but analyze. We thought you were strong enough to handle it. That wasn't an apology. That was a justification. It meant we chose the path of least resistance, and you were it, because you wouldn't fight back. We weren't trying to take from you, but you did. The bank statements don't have feelings. They have numbers. I miss my daughter. And there it was. The pull. The guilt string she'd been tugging my entire life. I set the letter on the kitchen table. I didn't tear it up. I didn't crumple it. I just set it down, and I let it sit there for 2 weeks while I decided what to say. I wrote back on a Saturday morning, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the kind of quiet that only comes from owning your own walls. Mom, I got your letter. I appreciate that you wrote it. I don't hate you. I don't hate Dad. I need you to hear that clearly, because I know the version of this story that's circulating through the family, and I know it includes the word hate. That's not what this is. But I can't pretend what happened was okay. And I can't accept an apology that still includes the word but. You said, I'm not making excuses, in the same paragraph where you explained why you did what you did. That's not an apology, Mom. That's a defense with softer language. You thought I was strong enough to handle it. You were right, I was. But strong enough to handle it shouldn't mean the one who silently absorbs the cost while someone else gets the benefit. When you're ready to talk, really talk, without explaining or justifying, I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere. This is my house, and the door is open. But I won't be your ATM again. I won't be the strong one who pays the bills and stays quiet. That version of me is retired. I love you. That hasn't changed. What's changed is what I'll accept. Cullen. I sealed the envelope, walked to the mailbox at the end of my driveway, dropped it in. The flag went up. The maple tree rustled overhead. The street was empty. I walked back to my house, through my front door, past my kitchen table, to my porch, where my coffee was still warm. I sat down and drank it. 6 months passed. I bought furniture slowly. A couch from an estate sale, deep blue, solid frame. A dining table that seated 4, though most nights it seated 1. A bookshelf I assembled myself on a Sunday afternoon, swearing only twice, which I consider a personal record. The maple tree in the front yard turned orange in October. I raked leaves for the first time in my life. It took 3 hours and I was sore for 2 days. I loved every minute of it. At work, I was promoted to senior accountant. My boss said it was overdue. My colleagues didn't know about the lawsuit, and I didn't tell them. Some things don't belong in the break room. Financially, I wasn't wealthy. The settlement, after taxes and legal fees and the down payment, left me with a modest cushion. No debt, clean credit, a retirement account I'd restarted from scratch. The spreadsheet I kept, because of course I kept a spreadsheet, showed a net worth that was finally, quietly positive. Dad and Mom didn't call. I didn't call them. The silence wasn't hostile. It was just the shape of things now, like a room where a piece of furniture used to be. You noticed the space, but eventually you stopped bumping into it. Brooke had blocked me on every platform. Her social media was still public, though, and through the algorithmic cruelty of the internet, I occasionally saw posts about Ridgecrest Lane, new curtains, a weekend project in the yard, her and Travis smiling for the camera. Whether the smiles were real, I couldn't say. Travis texted me on Christmas. "Merry Christmas, Cullen. Hope you're well." 3 lines, polite. I sent the same back. Aunt Ruth came for dinner every other Wednesday. She brought dessert. I made the main course. We never ran out of things to talk about. People ask me if I regret it. I'm sitting on my front porch when I tell you this, coffee in hand, morning light coming through the maple branches. The neighborhood is waking up. A jogger passes. A dog barks 2 streets over. The kind of ordinary, unremarkable morning that used to feel impossible when my money was going somewhere else. I don't regret getting what was mine. I regret that it took a lawsuit for my parents to hear me. I spent 10 years sending $1,225 a month, and not one person said thank you until a judge got involved. They still think I did this to hurt them. I know because Uncle Phil told Aunt Ruth, who told me not to stir the pot, but because she believes I deserve to know what's being said. According to Dad, I'm the daughter who chose money over family. Here's what I'd say to that, if he'd listen. I didn't choose money over family. I chose honesty over silence. I chose receipts over be grateful. And I chose to stop funding a system that treated me like an expense line on someone else's budget. Be grateful is not a financial plan. For the family should never mean at your expense. I didn't lose my family. I lost the version of my family that only worked if I stayed quiet and kept paying. That version was expensive, and I couldn't afford it anymore. Across the street, the neighbor family is setting up a grill on their front lawn. Kids running around, parents laughing, the smell of charcoal drifting. It's the kind of scene that used to make me ache. All that easy, uncomplicated togetherness. It still does, a little. But it doesn't break me anymore. I take a sip of coffee. The mug is warm. The porch is mine. If you're watching this and something feels familiar, if you've been the strong one, the co-signer, the family member whose credit score exists to serve someone else's dream, I want you to hear this. Your signature is not a gift. Your credit is not a favor. Your money is not a contribution that someone else gets to define after the fact. Just sign here is never just anything. Every page matters. Every line. Every initial. I was 24 when I signed those papers. I trusted my father. I believed him when he said it was temporary. I believed my mother when she said it was just paperwork. I didn't ask what a deed was, or how it differed from a mortgage, or why my name was on a document that gave me ownership of a property nobody intended me to own. I should have. And I'm telling you this so that you will. Keep your receipts. Read every page. And if someone, anyone, even someone you love, says it's just paperwork, that is exactly the moment you read it twice. Because the people who don't want you to read are usually the ones who benefit from your ignorance. Setting a boundary with family doesn't make you ungrateful. It doesn't make you cold or selfish or disloyal. It makes you someone who knows what they're worth. And if the people around you can't handle that, if the only version of you they can love is the version that pays and stays quiet, then what they love isn't you. It's the arrangement. I didn't burn my family down. I just stopped setting myself on fire to keep them warm. I finished my coffee, set the mug on the railing. The sun is fully up now. This house is small. This life is mine. That's enough. I stand up from the porch chair and walk inside. The filing cabinet is still in the corner of my living room. It moved with me, one of the first things I brought from the old apartment. But the second drawer, the one that used to hold 10 years of mortgage statements and transfer receipts and a folder thick enough to win a lawsuit, is closed now. The binder, the black 3-ring binder I carried into Margaret Voss's office, sits inside it, archived. Done. I don't need it anymore. The story it told has been told. On the wall above the bookshelf, there's a single framed photograph. It's from the day I got my keys. I'm standing in front of the door, holding them up. One hand, one key ring, one house. There's nobody else in the frame. I asked the mail carrier to take it. She was confused but willing, and the photo came out slightly crooked, which makes it better. I look at it every morning. My parents may never understand why I did what I did. Maybe one day they will. Maybe they'll show up at my door and we'll sit at the dining table that seats 4, and we'll have the conversation we should have had 10 years ago. The one without lawyers, without guilt trips, without be grateful. Maybe, maybe not. But I understand now, and that's enough. I know what I'm worth. I know what I paid. I know the difference between a gift and an obligation, between loyalty and exploitation, between silence and peace. My name is Cullen Ouellette. I'm 34 years old. I own my house. I own my story. And for the first time in 10 years, I owe nothing to anyone. That's the truth. And I've got the receipts to prove it. One more thing. A week after I recorded this story, and yes, I wrote all of this down before I said it out loud, because I wanted to get the facts right. I came home from work and found a small package on my doorstep. No return address. Brown paper wrapping, the old-fashioned kind. Taped neatly at the seams, which told me immediately that Mom didn't wrap it. She's a ribbon and bow person. This was utility. This was Dad. I brought it inside, set it on the kitchen table, opened it carefully. Inside was a single key. Old, brass, slightly tarnished. I recognized it immediately. It was the front door key to 227 Birch Hollow Road. The house I'd helped pay for. The house I'd co-owned without knowing it. The house they sold and split and never thought I'd fight for. Underneath the key was a folded piece of paper. Dad's handwriting, the same heavy slant, the same pressed-down letters. It said, "I should have given you this 10 years ago." That was it. No, I'm sorry. No, let's talk. No, I forgive you, or please forgive me. Just 8 words and a key that no longer opened anything. The locks had been changed. The house belonged to someone else. The key was useless in every practical sense, but I kept it. I put it in the drawer next to the black binder, closed the drawer, and stood there for a moment with my hand on the metal. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was the closest my father has ever come to admitting he was wrong. And maybe that's a start. Or maybe it's just a key. Either way, it's not my door to open anymore. The one that matters is right behind me, and it's already unlocked. That's my story. And if you're still here, thank you. I mean that. Now I have one last question for you. If you could go back in time and tell your younger self one thing about family and money, what would it be? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and some of the answers I've gotten on stories like this have genuinely changed the way I think. If this hit close to home, if you're the strong one, the cosigner, the one holding the receipts, check the description for more stories like this. There are a lot of us out here, more than you'd think, and we're all learning, one signature at a time, to read the fine print. I'll see you in the next